we got up to the bottom of page 54 and into page 55, where we are about to run into the three different shittas in Rishonim regarding whether or not Sfiras HaOmer is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan or a mitzvah d'Oraisa today.
The question remains on if it's two separate mitzvahs or one mitzvah?
We had that also.
Oh, okay.
That did not show up in the Maimer. That I just mentioned because it's an interesting aspect of Sfiras HaOmer and something that has to be understood. And it's also, that's much more like Geya L'maisa, because that means that produces the halacha that we don't make a bracha if we forget a day. Right? Because if it's a different mitzvah every day, then I would make a new mitzvah. You're going to put on a tefillin today, and you're going to make a bracha on putting on tefillin today. Right? Why? Well, it doesn't have anything to do with whether you put tefillin on yesterday. It's a new mitzvah to put on tefillin today. So is there a new mitzvah to count 16 tonight? Well, there is such a position, right? I mean, conceptually, you could say that. In which case, even if I didn't count 15, I should be able to make a bracha counting 16. Right? Or, no, the mitzvah is to count 49 days, 49 times. Right? And I do the same mitzvah 49 times, so if I miss one, well, I can't count 49 days. Right? Or another example of the same thing, and this is also L'maisa, and the Rebbe talked about this quite a bit. Right? Australians traveling over the date line to come to America. So they run into terrible problems, right? Most Australians, meaning kids from America who go home for Pesach, come back the long way. They come back through here. It costs a fortune. They come back through Eretz Yisrael. Because if you go to America from Australia through Eretz Yisrael, or Europe or wherever, so you don't have to cross the date line. So the easiest way to do it now is to go to the Emirates and then the Emirates to New York. But that's how everybody does it now. So why? Well, because if you fly over the date line, what happens? So I remember this happened to me in August, right? Okay, so in August it's irrelevant. But in ER, it's very relevant. So you woke up in Sydney on Rosh Lamed Nisan. You woke up today in Sydney. So last night you counted 15 in Sydney. And you woke up and you got on a plane and you flew for 15 hours to LA. Monday morning for Monday afternoon from Sydney. Got dark on the plane. So you counted Omer. You counted the 16th Omer on the plane because you counted 15 last night. This morning you got up, so you counted 15 last night. So you get on that plane and it gets dark on the plane tonight for you, and you count 16. Then you land in LA, and it's Monday. So they're going to count 16 tonight. You daven Marv in LA tonight. They're counting 16. You have to count 17.
Yeah.
What does that mean? That means you have to keep Shavuos a day earlier than everybody else. Shavuos happens for you on the 50th day of the Eimer. It doesn't have a date, Shavuos. Shavuos happens on the 50th day of the Eimer. So for you, Shavuos comes out a day early. Right? Now, what?
Couldn't you wait?
No, you have to count. It's nighttime.
Maybe you should return to Australia.
If you return to Australia, so then fine. Maybe you should not enter into the whole thing in the first place, right? That's why people don't do this. If you're returning, then you're right. Then it gets fixed the day you return. Because you miss a day. You leave LA on Monday and you arrive in Sydney on Wednesday. So you missed Tuesday night. So you catch up.
Bizarre reality.
Oh, it's completely bizarre. It's actually fun because it was my 40th birthday, and I flew from. Thanks, Doc. I got on the bus for free today, Doc. I'm not complaining. So it was my 40th birthday, and I flew. In those days, you couldn't fly international out of Melbourne, so it was Melbourne, Sydney, LA. So I woke up in Melbourne on my 40th birthday, got on a plane, went to Sydney. got on a plane, went to LA, landed in LA on my 40th birthday. So I felt 80. I got really old fast. It was my 40th birthday again, so I got the break. Then I flew to New York. It was crazy. I got from LA. I just stopped in. I didn't even stop in LA. I just flew to New York. So at the time was just all whacked out.
Oh man, that's great.
The basic distance between Vancouver, where I grew up, and in Australia, where our daughter lives, is 17 hours. Okay, so it's easier just to do 7 hours. Like that means instead of being 17 hours behind Australia, it's easier to do the cheshbon that Vancouver is just 7 hours ahead of Australia, except the day before. And when I call my daughter, if I'm visiting my mother and I call my daughter in Cairns in Australia, so at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, I'm calling my daughter and it's 10 a.m. for her on Wednesday. It is rather surreal. I mean, it's okay, but it's so far. It's just so far. Okay. There's also some interesting shittas where the dateline is. The basic position is that it's put in a place where it doesn't run into land in the middle of the Pacific Ocean somewhere. But there is actually a shita, and for this reason, there were rabbanim in Melbourne who wouldn't ever go to the beach on Friday. That it's right on the coastline of Australia. As you go in, the coastline is the dateline, and as the Pacific Ocean is the next day, which means it's Shabbos in the ocean. If it's Friday where you're standing, it's Shabbos in the ocean.
There's a similar concern in Hawaii.
Oh yeah, there's an issue in Hawaii also. Is it right? Is it near Hawaii, the one that most people go by today?
So the one of Hawaii is, I think there's a lot there probably gets lots of questions on it. For people, nobody's exactly sure where it is, but between Hawaii and Australia, it's a very long distance. But there's an opinion that perhaps you might have to avoid at least any kind of work in Friday because it might be in fact.
Because the simple pshat is the way most people. I mean, if you were to look on a map, it would be in between Hawaii and Asia, right? That's
right.
Usually
that's an artificial line.
Right, that's an artificial line. Hawaii is 3 hours behind the West Coast in regular.
Which is also so far away.
Yeah, but it's a long way away. But it's a 5-hour flight, I think. I've never been there. It's like the only person growing up where I grew up who had never been to Hawaii. It's where everybody went.
I heard somewhere there was 180 degrees around the world from Jerusalem. Is that correct, or is there
What does that mean?
That the date line is on the other side of the world?
I'm not sure. Not sure. That'd be interesting. Not sure. Anyway, but the dateline does make Sphere Samer an interesting experience. So avoid it. We had 2 sons who got stuck in Australia. I mean, stuck meaning they went to help their sister Pesach they were learning in New York. They went to help their sister Pesach, and they just stayed in Australia until after Shavuos. They went to Melbourne, worked in the leaders Chabad house until before Shavuos, came back up to our daughter, helped there for Shavuos, and then came home. Going to Pesach, it was a 2-month affair. It's like, I just couldn't get back. It's a crazy thing. But okay. So first bringing the korban, which is bir ha-meichin, that's what we learned yesterday. Meichin of the Nefesh Abamis, right? Because bringing the korban is ein atina yedea likrei abba sheyitam tam dagan, that a child doesn't know how to call out Abba until he tastes dagan. So korban mincha is about meichin. So the meichin of the nefesh elokis, generally, that's chita, that's wheat. Meichin, intellect of the nefesh abamis, that's barley. That's the korban ha'ayim. So, and that happens in a day. The nature of intellect, as we talked about yesterday. the beer of the midas begins after the beer of the meichin. The rectification of the midas happens after the rectification of the intellect, and that's a 49-day process. Okay, that's what the Rebbe taught us, and that is the pasuk Mashcheni Akarecha Narutza Heviani Amelech Hadarav. Mashcheni is Pesach, the revelation from above. Acharecha Narutza is the 49-day process of getting the Nefesh and Bahamis interested in Elokus. And Heviani Amelech Hadarav, the king will bring me into his chambers. That's Shavuos. Okay. So we said there are three shittas. We only talked about two of them yesterday. The third one is such a fascinating one. There are three shittas regarding whether or not Sfiras Eimer today is D'Oraisa or D'Rabbanan. And again, what's the issue? Well, we don't bring the korban. So just as Moshe said yesterday, when I asked you the question, so what's it like? Maror. Maror is only mentioned relative to Korban Pesach. So is there a mitzvah D'Oraisa to eat maror when you don't bring the Korban Pesach? So basically we say no. There's no mitzvah D'Oraisa to eat maror. There's a mitzvah D'Rabbanan, which we do. Okay. So what about Sfiras Eimer? Does the same thing work? So we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down. I mean, we read the line, we'll read it again. 7 lines down, the last 3 words on the line on page 55. In this it's understood that in the time of Golus there are different opinions be'inyan mitzvahs. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't give you a copy? No, I'm sorry. I gave you everything else. I didn't give you a copy. I gave you a hug. I gave you your test. I gave you a synopsis. But I didn't give you the ikr here. All right? Okay, page 55. 7 lines down. Now 8 lines down. B'zeh yuvan masha b'zman hagolus yeshnam chilukei deyas binyan Sfiras Eimer. Deya Rishena, he shagam b'zman hagolus, even in the time of Golus, yeshnam a mitzvah d'Sfiras Eimer mid'oraisa. That's the Rambam. Deya base, the second position, sheb'zman hagolus in a mitzvah Sfiras Eimer rak mid'Rabbanan. That's Tosfos on the page in Menachos. Deya Gimel, and then as he's like, what else can there be? Right? So the third position is the wildest. Right? Vehidas Rabbeinu Yerucham. Rabbeinu Yerucham is a well-known Rishon. Right? He's brought in Halachic Sfarim. Rabbeinu Yerucham. Shemachalik bein mimni yemei lemimni shvuye. He differentiates between counting days and counting weeks. The mimni yemi, counting days, ugam achshav de midraisa. He says that's a din deraisa this now still. Umimni shvuyi, but counting weeks, he rag midrabanan is only midrabanan. Now, how in the world does that work? Right? Meaning there's a mitzvah to count days and count weeks. Right, and the Rabbeinu Yerucham says, well, okay, but there are 2 separate mitzvahs on some level, to such an extent that actually, b'zman hagolus, there's still a mitzvah d'oraisa to count days, but there's no mitzvah d'oraisa to count weeks. There's only a mitzvah d'rabbanan to count weeks. So that also now really explains the position of the Sfardim, the way the Sfardim count, right? That they'll say today's 15 days to the Eimer, which is 2 weeks in a day. Because 2 weeks in a day is they're not passing like Rabbeinu Yerucham, right? But it's interesting that they're emphasizing the day so powerfully. Now we did talk about this yesterday that there's no question that the ikr is the day. That being said, there's also a mitzvah to count weeks. So Rabbeinu Yerucham has this absolutely fascinating position, which the Rebbe is going to explain al pi Chassidus, and the explanation is astounding. Al pi Chassidus, it makes perfect sense. Rabbeinu Yerucham, right? Al pi Nigla, it's hard to understand. Uluchaura, at first glance, ain't a move on. It's not understood. What's the difference between counting days, counting nights? Same psukim teaches to count days and count days and weeks. So the same psukim tell us to count days and to count weeks. Another way of saying, however. Ha'inyan hu dehine shemitzvus mimne yemei shu inyan bira midas bepratius. What I'll pay the pneumius of it all. So what's the mitzvah of the day is to count chesed shebetiferes. The mitzvah to count weeks is to count the midah of Tiferes. Whereas the mitzvah to count days is to count chesed shebetiferes. What's the difference? Let's see. That since this is relevant to thought, speech, and action, we'll just read a little more, then we'll discuss this, that it should be b'chol d'rechedeu. We should reach the state of b'chol d'rechedeu, as we talked about yesterday. The difference between kol masech l'shem shemayim, that this is a means to a higher end, and the higher level, which is b'chol d'rechedeu, that it's all an end unto itself, it's all elokus. L'chein hine aveda zois, this level of aveda, the level of aveda that it is all about being expressed in thought, speech, and action. This level of Aveda is relevant in all times. Mashein Kain, keep reading and it'll become clearer, then we'll discuss it. Inyan Mimne Shvuyi, Minye Shvu, what's that? That's counting the midah. The midah itself. Now, to put it in psychological terms, which everybody likes, right? What's the midah? I mean, it works. What's the midah itself? A subconscious reality. There's the midah sheba midah, which is the conscious expression of the subconscious reality. Right? Chesed sheba gvura. What's the essential midah? Gvura. What's that? That's an aspect of your emotional reality in the makeup of your soul. Never shall kiss, never shall. Right? That's a subconscious reality, or a superconscious reality, if you want to differentiate between Nefesh Bahamis and Nefesh Elokis. Right? That's not conscious you. Chesed shebegvura is the conscious expression of the subconscious, the conscious expression in the oifen of chesed, of the midah, the subconscious reality of gvura. I mean, what's the subconscious force that's driving all this? Gvura. What's the conscious expression of it? Chesed. Chesed shebegvura. That your gvura produces an act of chesed. Okay. Well, we'll talk about this in the next paragraph, because I was going to go through chesed shebegvura, chesed shebechesed, gvura, etc. Okay. This week is Tiferes. We'll have to talk about that also. Just because we're starting Tiferes.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
this is confusing to me.
This is confusing? Okay. I get it. So let's try again. Right? What's a midah? The midah itself, the midah of chesed, what is that? That's a power of your soul. One of the aspects of your soul. It's not conscious you. It's subconscious you. Right? In physical terms, we're made up of all these pieces. You see any of them? No. What's in there? Well, all sorts of stuff. There's hearts and spleens and livers and gallbladders. There's all sorts of gucky stuff in there. Okay, fine. And that's the stuff that's really making you go. Okay, beseder. But what did you just see me do? You saw me pick up a piece of paper. Why was I able, whatever this is, right? Why was I able to pick up a piece of paper? I was able to pick up that tissue because my brain sent signals to my arm. This is all happening in Pneumius. I don't see any of this. My brain is sending signals to my arm through my nervous system that it's a good idea to move a little to the left and pick that up. Move a little, close your hand, and raise your hand. Right? Now, I don't have to tell myself to do that. It just does it. Now it worked. Right? Okay, that's how it works, right? That's a pretty sophisticated act, right? Wait until you have kids and you watch them learn how to do it. It's the coolest thing in the world, right? It's so fascinating watching them slowly but surely figure all these things out, right? Like, I can put this out there and grab that and put it in my mouth. That's amazing. How do they? But they can't. It takes a while to figure it out. It's astounding. Okay, so they're excited, but you and I don't get so excited about that. But there's a panemius to all that. Now, do I have direct control over how the panemius of all that is working? No. That's my neurological system, and if there's one system that we're not very good at having any control over whatsoever, it's that. And anybody who unfortunately is afflicted with any neurological problems is, it's hit and miss. Modern medicine is really, really not very good at dealing with neurological problems. And why anybody would become a neurologist, I don't understand, because you're just failing all the time. No, seriously, it's just, I have a very close friend who's dealing with Parkinson's, and he's just suffering. There's nothing they can, and then every now and then, there's a new drug, and then he's, they've got him all drugged up with this and that, trying to keep him, in a place where he's basically able to function, and he does. He's amazing, but it's just, it's just so hard to watch because nothing helps. Nothing really helps. Yeah, a little better, a little worse. How you doing? Good days, bad days. Okay. Other things, unbelievable. The stuff that modern medicine has figured out how to do, it's just beyond belief, right? I mean, there's only a couple. It's interesting how relatively few people in the room are wearing glasses, right? But I mean, there was a time of human existence where there was no such thing as glasses. Can you imagine what your life would be if you couldn't correct your vision as well as they're able to correct your vision now? Right? I mean, you'd be walking into walls all day. Right? Certainly couldn't drive a car, though, of course, I assume if there were no glasses, there would be no cars. But the Flintstones had cars, so. Right? Okay, so what was that an example of? The inner workings that you see only the outer expression of it. But there's this whole inner reality there that's happening, and it's all happening in Gashmias, so too in Ruchnias, so too on an emotional level. There's this whole reality called your subconscious emotional makeup. And what do we call that in Chassidus? Midas. That's Midas. Okay. So that subconscious reality, do I have control over that subconscious reality? No. Do I have control how that subconscious reality, do I have immediate control over that subconscious reality? No. Right? Might I be able to have some sort of ability to bring about a slightly healthier subconscious reality? Yes. Hard work, but yes. Okay, and we can help people who have psychological issues, definitely help them deal with it and cure certain things. Okay, true, very hard work. Okay, but to get to the point where our subconscious reality would be absolutely, completely, and totally healthy, do I have the ability to do that now? No. Why not? We're in Gullus. God is hidden. Do I have in the times of Beis Hamikdash, were we able to affect our subconscious reality more successfully? Yes, absolutely, 100%. No question. All right? Are we able to now? No. Therefore, what does Rabbi Rucham say? What is it that we can do? Our thought, speech, and action. It's Tanya, right? Beinoni. It's all just Tanya, the Beinoni. What's the Beinoni? The Beinoni is the one who has the ability, which is the ability every single one of us has, to have proper control of his conscious behavior, thought, speech, and action. Does he have control of his subconscious reality? No. His Nefesh HaBahamis is his Nefesh HaBahamis and is into all the weird and wonderful things that it's into. Does he necessarily allow it to express itself? No. He has the ability to overcome its desires and not allow the Nefesh HaBahamis to express its weirdness. Okay. That's called a Beinoni. Now, again, not that there's a person who's the Beinoni. Every single person we've talked about is a Beinoni relative to certain mitzvahs, a tzaddik relative to certain mitzvahs, and something else relative to some other things that they haven't worked on successfully yet. Okay. But there's all sorts of mitzvahs that you might have, or averas. Usually people think about it in terms of averas, but it's also in terms of positive mitzvahs, things you might not want to do, and you might think about, you might have a desire not to do it, but immediately once you become aware of that desire, you push that desire not to do this away completely and do the mitzvah. Okay, so relative to that mitzvah, you're a Beinoni. Relative to an avera that's similar to that, it might be that there's some subconscious connection to that avera. As soon as that idea pops into your head, you go, look, fair, go away, leave me alone. I'm so not interested in you. Okay, well, that's a Beinoni relative to that particular issue, right? There are other issues that you have no taiva for whatsoever, right? When was the last time you had an overwhelming taiva to go worship an idol? Right? Okay, so why? So you're a tzaddik relative to all sorts of mitzvahs, relative to avodah zarah. Right? We've talked about it in terms of murder. When was the last time you had some taiva to go murder someone? Said, I want to murder my roommate, but no, it's usher, so I'm not going to do it. Oh, Baruch Hashem, you're a Beinoni. No, you're a tzaddik. When do you have a taiva to murder? Right? Why in the world would you have such a taiva? Right? And if you do, please let us know, right? So, right? Okay, so relative to that, you're a tzaddik, and then every single person in this room does things against the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So relative to that, so we might not be a tzaddik and might not be a Beinoni. Right? Might be something else relative to that particular aspect of our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, fine. So what's that? That discussion is all on the level of the Mida Shebe Mida. The Chesed Shebe Gvura, the Gvura Shebe Gvura, the Tiferes Shebe Gvura, or the Chesed Shebe Tiferes, Gvura Shebe Tiferes. The expression of it in thought, speech, and action, but not the Mida itself. Right? Because when you say Chesed Shebe Tiferes, the Iker is obviously Tiferes. The Mida is Tiferes. Right? And what's chesed? Chesed is that which is being expressed as a result of the tiferes. Or slightly different way of expressing it, the expression of chesed as in the context of tiferes. But really, what's the ikar expression? Tiferes. It's coming from that part in you which is called the Midah of Tiferes, which is a very, very interesting Midah and a unique Midah to the extent that really, in terms of Midas, there's only Chesed and Gvura, there's no Tiferes. And Tiferes is simply the perfection of Chesed and Gvura. And that's why it's interesting. Chassidus explains that in Nefesh Habahamis is not really Tiferes. I mean, there is, we talk about it, but it's not really there. What's Tiferes? Tiferes is the perfection of Chesed and Gvura. The perfect mizug of those two, which can only happen on the level of Nefesh Elokis, can't happen on the level of Nefesh Habahamis, because it can't happen in Gashmis. There's no perfection in Gashmis. There's only perfection on the level of soul, not on the level of body. So since in the level of soul there's a reality of perfection, so then the perfect balance of Chesed and Gevura results in something called Tiferes. I once heard Rabbi Paltiel bring a beautiful mashal for this, just from a Rashi and Chumash. When Moshe Rabbeinu is elevating the Jewish people in Parshas Mishpatim, so it says that he sprinkled half the blood on Am Yisrael and half the blood on the Mizbeach. And Rashi says a malach came and was mechalik the blood. A malach came and divided the blood. What's the problem? That's Rashi's problem. Help be pshat. What do you mean a malach came? He divided the blood. What's the problem? What can't you do in Gashmias? Okay, so in that context, what can't you do? Perfectly divide the blood. Impossible. In Gashmias. You could get kir, chatzi, but you couldn't get chatzi. Where could you get chatzi? A malach. Something beyond physicality could express itself in the perfect division of that blood. But no matter how precise the measure you're using, weighing the blood, how do you know there's not one more molecule in that one as opposed to that one? You'll never be able to get there. A malach can. So Rashi says that a malach came and was mechal. Rashi. It's like keeping the seemingly innocuous Rashi has nothing to do with anything. Right? No, the only way you could possibly reach such a state is if a place higher than Gashmias reveals itself in that situation. That's the malach. So by the Malach, there could be complete and total Chatzi, because there's no Gashmis by the Malach, so he's transcendent that. Okay. So to the Eibusher, Chatzois Alayla, right, by Mitzrayim, right? The Eibusher, Chatzois Alayla could exist by the Eibusher. You and I can decide when Chatzois is. So why did Moshe, the Eibusher said B'Chatzois, Moshe said K'Chatzois. So all of the Rashi, different Pshatim in Rashi, trying to explain why Moshe changed the words of the Eibusher. Well, simple Pshat, why? Because a human being can't, the sorcerers of Paro might make a mistake, and they'll think, oh, the Eibusher made a mistake. He missed by 2 seconds. Right? The Abish didn't make a mistake. You made a mistake in your calculations. So Chatzos, around Chatzos. When are we going to start Shiur? Around 10:33. Why? I didn't find any. What was the problem? I thought I don't know what you said before, but what I heard was perfectly reasonable. I don't know why you went under the table yesterday either. I didn't get it. But anyway, whatever. You say nasty things about me, who cares, man? You know what they say? There was when I was growing up, there was an old saying, right? I don't care what they say about me as long as they're talking about me. that was the old saying when I was growing up. Right? Doesn't matter what they say about you as long as they're talking about you.
What then is there the 7 Mida, or there's just no 7, and 7's not a lie, but it's a lie, or like how do you?
Look, in Elokus, there's 7 Midas.
No, but
what by Nefesh Bahamis?
Yeah.
So since when we talk about the Nefesh Bahamis, we talk about the Nefesh Bahamis as being a mirror image of the Nefesh Elokis. So we will talk about Tiferes and the Nefesh Bahamis, but Emes La Tiferes is Emes Lamita. Chesed, Gevura is Emes.
Yeah.
Right? Gevura is much deeper reality than Chesed. Gevura is Emes. What's Emes Lamita? Absolute Emes? Tiferes. Does that exist in Nefesh Bahamis?
Got it.
No. Can you talk about that reality in some way in the context of physical reality? So in physical, simple example, in physical reality, can you talk about the half of something? Yes, sure. In absolute, complete, and total truth should be truth terms. Can you? No. No such thing. Right? Another example, that's brought in Chassidus all the time. That's the corner, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no such thing as a corner. It doesn't exist. It's a completely conceptual thing. There's either the south wall or the west wall. There's no corner. There's no such thing. Where the south wall meets the west wall is called the corner. There's no reality of the corner. Right? There's no physical reality of a corner. It doesn't exist. Right? You understand where they're round? It's not the corner. That's a different space. That's not this wall and not that wall, if you want to say that. But really, if the corner is a real corner, so what is it? It's where this meets this. But it itself doesn't exist. You can say that in time also, just like you can say it in space. Present time, what is it? It's where future turns into past. Is there an existence of present? No, not really. Even though, interesting enough, that's the aspect of time that we experience most powerfully, but is there a real existence to present? No. Just what was going to be became what was. Because by the time I'm aware of it happening, it already was. So you'll say, I'm speaking, but relative to the truth of your experiences, I already spoke. I was going to speak. Now I'm speaking. Well, okay. Now, obviously, the Torah speaks that way in present tense. So it's not that present tense has no metzius whatsoever, but in absolute terms, is there an existence of present? No, it's just when the future transformed into the past. Right? How long does the present last? Doesn't, right? I mean, a macro second. I mean, what's that? Mm-hmm. Capture the present. Okay, so it's interesting because on a certain level you can capture the present, because when you take the picture on a certain level, so that image, there's that moment in time where that image was, and so you, so to speak, captured it. Okay, but even that is still I mean, it's an infinitesimal amount of time, but it's still 186,000 miles per second between the image and the lens of your camera. Right? So even that is some difference. I mean, immeasurable, but some difference. Right? Okay. So in Gashmias, Emes Lamita, he doesn't exist. Right? Some level of Emes does, though. So there's Chesed, there's Gvur. It's interesting in that sense that Tiferes. That's why in Kabbalah they generally talk about 2 meters, Chesed and Gvur. That doesn't mean there aren't 7 meters. There are 7 meters of the soul. Say the 2 basic meters. And the Alter Rebbe also, when the Alter Rebbe discusses meters, what does he talk about? Chesed van feyen, Gvur van feyen. Chesed in its expressions and Gvur in its expressions. Wait. What happened to Tiferes in Yesod, the middle? Okay, that's just the perfection of the 2 extremes, which is rather elusive in Elam Hazah. Okay, so back to our issue now, what the Rebbe is trying to explain to us. Right? Rabbeinu Yerucham says as follows: the subconscious reality of the Midah itself, that I cannot ultimately deal with. What can I deal with? The expression of that subconscious reality in thought, speech, and action. And that's the Midah Sheba Midah. Right? That's the the Midah itself is, again, the Midah this week is Tiferes. So in the model the Rebbe is going to explain to us in the next paragraph, so Chesed should be Tiferes is an act of Tiferes, or a feeling of Chesed that is a result of a reality of Tiferes. Whatever Tiferes is, we don't get into that right now. Right? Okay. So we're going to see Chesed Sheba Chesed. So what's Chesed Sheba Chesed? Chesed is love. What's Chesed Sheba Chesed? Either an act or a feeling of love that comes from a more basic subconscious reality called love. So how much control do I have over the subconscious? Well, Rabbeinu Yerucham would say none, or very little today. Very little, not none. Okay, so therefore there's no mitzvah deraisa to deal with that aspect of my personality, because I can't. What can I deal with? Deraisa. Was the able to tell me I'm obligated to deal with in these days? Chesed, Sheba Chesed, not Chesed itself. Chesed, Sheba Chesed. That I can deal with. Counting the days, I can do that. I can't carry the weeks. That's something that we'll be able to do being Mesa Mashiach. We could do evidently Bismana bias. We can't do it now. When there was greater revelation of Elokus, those levels of our subconscious reality were also in order. Mm-hmm. So I mentioned it the other day that it's actually the same class of Rabbi Paltiel talking about the fact that very often the more you get to know someone, and he didn't mean that he didn't mean it in the completely negative way. He meant it in the jocular way in which he said the more you get to know people, the more you realize they're just as cracked as you. So okay. So in other words, there's not, I would say unhealthy, but a not completely healthy part of every single one of us that we have a very hard time bringing to a state of complete and total health. Okay, that's reasonable. Does that mean we're all worthless and shall jump off a building, God forbid? No. Absolutely. That's just the human conditioning. You also have an Nefesh Elokis, and you're incredible and godly. Like there's a Nefesh Bahamis also. The Nefesh Bahamis has his issues. And some of those issues we can't deal with. I mean, he's not going away. We're not going to become tzaddikim. I mean, the complete birur of the internal midas of the nefesh bahamis is called a tzaddik. Right? That's what a tzaddik is. So nefesh bahamis is completely and totally healthy and godly. Well, it's not shayach for us, right? So therefore, Rabbi Kaplan says there's no mitzvah deraisa to count weeks. Just that's how the Rebbe explains it. How do you explain this? Al pi pshat. It's almost impossible. Al pi pnimius. It makes perfect sense. So let's see it again. Mitzvahs min yemi shuinin piramides bepratius. Hine liyesh is a shaykh l'machshav dibur ma'isa. Since this is relevant to thought, speech, and action, which is what we said above yesterday, that it should be in all your ways, know him, that your thought, speech, and action should be in line with the Kadosh Baruch Hu's will. And therefore, this is something that's shaykh to every single generation. Golas, Gula, it's shaykh to everybody. Tanya, counting weeks. This is not relevant to the external expression of the midas in thought, speech, and action. Meaning, in modern terms, conscious behavior, which I am responsible for. I'm responsible for my conscious behavior. What about certain subconscious realities that exist in me that I find annoying and hard to deal with? Well, I don't know where that came from. I don't know why it's there. Hine, af sheyesh bezeh maila legabe aveda demim niyemi. Right? Even though this has a certain maila relative to counting days, because after all, fixing, so to speak, my subconscious reality is at a much higher and deeper level than simply changing the way I'm acting. Right? Since the Rebbe says Shazeu bir hamida b'chlaluse, this is the rectification in the mida in its totality, because I'm talking about the subconscious reality. Shazeu naili yesed is obviously higher. If I could go poof and change my subconscious realities, then everything else would fall in place. Avalidakis, on the other hand, since this is loftier, the ain's a shaykh lepeil b'peil, but this is not relevant to actual action, meaning it's possible to still have some negative subconscious reality, but I can still act properly. Right? Person might have this negative subconscious reality, a tremendous miser. He doesn't like giving things. He's not a giving person. He's a tremendous improper expression of gvura, right? Meaning gvura might mean you're going to give more than chesed, right? Chesed, shebechesed would be, if we'll talk about this in a second when we get to the midas themselves, but chesed could also be an act. Chesed shebechesed could be the action of a chesed. That should be chesed, and chesed shebechesed would be the midah driving the action. Because the second one sometimes can be an action or it can be a midah. We'll see. But the Rebbe is going to explain it here based on being a midah, an emotional trait. But there's also a way that chesed shebechesed could be the action of chesed. Okay, so what's driving the action of chesed? Why am I giving in tzedakah? Because I care for him. Okay, so I give him tzedakah. How much do I give him? I give him whatever I give everybody else. Okay. Gevurah shebechesed. I'm doing an act of chesed. I'm giving him tzedakah. Why? What's gevurah? Gevurah isn't my desire to express some sort of positive emotion, which is chesed shebechesed. Chesed shebechesed coming from me. I love him. I loved tzedakah. Okay, so I gave him tzedakah. No, gevurah is not me. Gevurah is how much does he need. It's not about me. It's about him. Gevurah is how much does he need. It's to dissect this situation in a very unfeeling way, so to speak. Let's just dissect. And how much does he need? Oh, I might give him more than I would have given him mitzad chesed shebechesed. Mitzad chesed shebechesed, $100. I look at the situation that he's in, gevurah shebechesed. This guy needs a lot of money. I mean, he's really in bad shape, so I'll give him more. So gevurah ended up giving more tzedakah than chesed shebechesed. Tiferes shebechesed. In that model, is I identify with him completely, and it has nothing to do with me, and therefore I give him chesed, I give him tzedakah based on that complete and total identity with him, which is often called compassion. I feel his pain, not mine, not my reaction to his situation. I just feel his pain, and therefore I give him whatever I give him. That's Tiferet because in that model.
So, meaning so.
Not what the Rebbe is going to explain to us. I'm sorry. In the next, that's a different model. You know.
So I'm just trying to understand the difference between Chesed, Gevurah Sheba Chesed versus Tiferes. Like it seems like Tiferes is like a superior thing, but can it be that one of the midas like Chesed is? I don't know if it's greater
Of the
than
three,
Gevurah.
Chesed is the lowest.
Oh yeah.
No, of those three that I just explained,
Ah.
Chesed will be the least impressive, the least deep. Let's put it that way.
But I'm saying, can we say that one of the midas is greater? Like, does anyone say that Chesed is a greater midah than Gevurah? Like, is that okay to say, or like Tiferes is better? because
Well,
it's-
I mean, Chassidus will say that Gevurah is a greater midah than Chesed all the time. Yeah, because Chesed is still me feeling me. I love you. I love you. I love you. It's all about my feeling for you. That doesn't mean I don't care for you. I do care for you because I love you. Yesh misha oihev. Gevurah, it's bittul. It's not me. Gevurah is much deeper than Chesed. The world's into Chesed. Right. That's why it's this deep. It spreads out all over. But it's this deep. Right? The internet is all Chesed.
Right.
There's no depth, but it's everywhere. Right?
So, could you just repeat again the difference between Gevurah Sheba Chesed versus Tiferes Sheba
Tiferes.
Chesed?
Gevurah Sheba Chesed is based on the truth of the situation. I'll dissect the situation. That's Gevurah, dissecting things, and Chesed, it's all just one big mush. Right? In Chesed, so when I put something in the water, it dissolves and is invisible in the water. So, Gevurah is I see each particle. I can see each aspect of the situation. I dissect it. Right? If I want to judge something, what do I have to do? I have to do that, right? I have to dissect the situation and see it, as opposed to just see sort of some sort of basic picture. No, I don't want the basic picture. That's Chesed. I want the details of it. Okay, that's Gevurah. So Gevurah is coming to my understanding of this person's situation in a much more sophisticated way, and therefore coming to a conclusion as to how much stock I should give to him based on his situation. Right?
But
Tiferes,
you're still feeling it.
yeah, it's still me. Bidiyuk. Now it's me in an expression of bittul, but it's still there's a me there being butthole. Tiferes, just feeling his pain. It's like I'm giving myself. I'm not giving myself. I'm giving him because it's all about him. Just feel his pain, feel his situation, which is that's emes lamite. So Tiferes, and that can only exist in Nefesh Elokis. That does not exist in Nefesh Bahamis. I can't feel him in the Nefesh Bahamis. It'll always be me feeling him.
So
That's why we said earlier, Tiferes doesn't really exist in the Nefesh Bahamis. Doesn't really exist in Gashmis. Tiferes is the perfect blend. Rav Yol used to always talk about, Tiferes, the Rebbe is going to talk about this also, that Tiferes is Yofi. Tiferes means beauty, right? It's also, right? What's Yofi? Yofi is not one color. Yofi is all sorts of colors blending together in a perfect way. Right? Now, even that purple shade that the designer found of the cloth, it's just the perfect. Purple. Purple's a gvanim is all sorts of different shades brought together into one color, but that color is a little bit of red and a little bit of purple and a little bit of white, right? Okay, so it's not necessarily the rainbow, but it's not just blue. Blue's nice, but it's boring. Red, red. Okay, no. Red with a little bit of blue and a little bit of white is a more interesting color and a more beautiful expression of color than just red. Right? That's the difference. Right? Now, it can also be them, usually we think of them also in differentiated from each other. When you look at a painting, what makes the painting beautiful? All the different colors that are expressed in that painting and how they, one moves into the other so beautifully. So it's not just a purple line. That's Hunter Biden art, but that's not, that's not real art.
Good morning.
Right? Okay. But that's what art is, right? Art is the bringing together in a unique and beautiful way all sorts of different things. And that's the tiferes of it, whether that's a painting or also a musical composition, same thing. All sorts of different notes brought together in such a, okay, that sounds nice, but is much nicer. Not the one I just did, but one put together properly. Mm-hmm. And what will be even more interesting is when the orchestra is playing them all, and some people are playing it a certain way, and some people playing a slightly different way, and the oboes are doing that noise, and the trumpets are doing that noise, and the violins are doing that noise, and it's all brought together in this absolutely incredible way to make this sound that's just wow, that really affects you. Okay, that's Tiferes. As opposed to just, well, nice note. Okay, I like that. That was nice. But I can't do that. Okay, fine. If I hear, Jan Pierce do that, I can't do what Jan Pierce could do. Okay. Because of the Rebbe, Jan Pierce.
Really?
Yep. Fascinating. I just read a whole thing about his relationship with the Rebbe. The Rebbe was Makar of Jan Pierce and his wife. They became Shabbos. And he called himself Lubavitcher. Jan Pierce was the greatest opera singer of his time, but also because of the Rebbe's influence, also did all sorts of Jewish cantorial music. Wow. Yeah, I also didn't know this. I'd heard it when I was a kid. I remember hearing about Jan Pierce. My parents had records of Jan Pierce.
Yoshua Pinchas Perlmuth.
Yep. Wow. Yep. Never grew a beard because of, but he stopped performing on Shabbos. And I'll see if I can find the article. Like it was an English article. It's in Beis Mashiach in English. A whole article on Jan Pierce and his relationship with the Rebbe. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. His wife was firmer than him earlier than him, right? And he was still performing on Shabbos, and she wasn't. She obviously wasn't performing. So and then he ended up stopping. He stopped performing on Shabbos. And when you were as big as him and as good as him, you could do that. Like he could call his own tune at a certain point. No pun intended. But yeah, he who knew? Okay, we have to stop punct at 8:30 today. It's Rosh Chodesh and there's lots to do. Okay, so the Rebbe says that we can't do. What was given to us is the kayach hu rak al mashu shaykh laveda b'feil. So the Rebbe explains Hashita and Rishonim regarding Sphere Saimer al Pichsins. And it's the most complete understanding of Rabbeinu Yerucham. Understanding of Al Pi Nigla is much more difficult. Okay, Beseder, learning Psukim, etc. But days, weeks. How can you? No, Al Pi Pnimis, it makes perfect sense why there might be a mitzvah to count days and not a mitzvah to count weeks. We paskin like the Rambam, Baruch Hashem, it's a mitzvah d'oraisa, and we have a mitzvah d'oraisa to do every day. Let's start the next piece just to see where we're going. Ubir inyan hiskalus and midas ech shekol midah midah klula mizayin. The Rebbe's not going to go through the midah of chesed twice. Chesed shebechesed, gevura shebechesed, down till malchus shebechesed as it expresses itself in the nefesh elokis, and the same thing in the nefesh bahamis. He's going to do it twice. Okay, now we can just do the introduction, and then we'll see it tomorrow inside. There's two different ways. It's hard to do this in 3 minutes. We'll continue tomorrow. But there's two different ways in which we can relate to chesed shebechesed. Now, in both models, obviously, the Iker Midah is the second of the two. Chesed shebechesed. That's the Iker. The Iker is chesed. And chesed shebe is a secondary expression of the Iker, which is the chesed itself. Okay, always, no matter how you look at it. But, and this is in Chassidus, the Rebbe is going to explain it completely and totally, except for one little hint at the beginning, but completely and totally based on the I'm going to always say the second one, the Iker one, the second Midah, Chesed Shubha Chesed. This is the week of Chesed, the week of Tiferes. That's the Iker, right? So the second Midah is a Midah, is an emotional attribute. There is also a way of explaining it that the second Midah is a Maisa, an action. So Chesed Shebechesed would be an action Shebechesed. This is how we were talking about it before. The action of Chesed, the action of, let's say, giving tzedakah, and what's powering that? Chesed. Love for that person. Okay? So in that model, what you see is the action, is the second midah, which is the Iker. You see the action of Chesed. In the model that the Rebbe is going to use, the second midah is a midah. It's an emotional, subconscious emotional trait. And Chesed Shebechesed is the expression of that subconscious emotional trait in an act of Chesed. Chesed that results from Chesed. So therefore, what you see is the first one, the Chesed of it, or the Gevura of it, or the Tiferes of it, right? It's really manyen. Now, here the Rebbe talks about it this way. Also, the Rebbe Shab in Tafresh Nun Hey, also the Frierdiker Rebbe in Tafshinav. So where in Chassidus is this other expression? So the Frierdiker Rebbe mentions the fact that there was a mimer of the Mittler Rebbe that we don't have. But the Frierdiker Rebbe says there was the Mittler Rebbe said a mimer where he went through. Now this is only something the Mittler Rebbe would do, right? Or could do, because he had Chassidim who could listen to mimarim that lasted 8 hours, right? That he went through all 49 midos in one mimer. The Mittler Rebbe, and we do not have the mimer. It's not written down anywhere. We don't have it. But the Frierdiker Rebbe mentions the mimer. And it's very interesting because he mentions the mimer and he talks about, I'm trying to think of the exact example that he brings. He brings an example of Tiferes Shebechesed, he says, is the simcha. Tiferes can also be expressed as simcha, which we'll talk about. This, because we're in the week of Tiferes, we have to talk about Tiferes a little bit. Tiferes can be the simcha that one feels by virtue of doing an act of chesed. That would be Tiferes Shebechesed. The simcha one feels from giving tzedakah. That's how the Mittler Rebbe describes Tiferes Shebechesed. So what's chesed? It's an action, it's not a midah. And you can explain both ways. You can go through all of them both as an action and as a... Now, here the Rebbe is only going to go through it as a midah. That's generally how it's understood. What's hard to explain if you see it as an action is what's malchus shebeh, because malchus is action. So what's the action of the action? How does that work? Okay. So in that model, it's the one meter that's hard to explain is Malchus Shebe Chesed, Malchus Shebe Gvura. Because Gvura is what you see. Gvura is the exact expression, the expression of exact reality that you see, which is Gvura. Chesed as expressed in exactitude. Tiferet says, okay, but what's Malchus? Malchus is action already. Okay, fine. So we'll see tomorrow. The Rebbe is going to start explaining Chesed Shebechesed. We'll also talk about Tiferet just because we're in the week of Tiferet, and it's probably reasonable to spend some time talking about the inyan of Tiferet, just so we'll know what we're doing this week. Might as well throw it out, but I mean we're going to be focusing on in the Maimer Chesed Shebechesed. Okay, well Chesed Shebechesed all the way to Malchus Shebechesed and Nefesh Elokis. Chesed Shebechesed all the way to Malchus Shebechesed and the Nefesh Ba'amis. Okay, and then after that, the Rebbe will explain what Leg Baimer is all about. Okay, we will see you tomorrow.
Thank you.